And our ongoing coverage of this pivotal midterm election season continues as we continue to conduct extensive interviews with the major candidates in all of the major statewide races. We're joined now by one of those candidates, Republican State Senator Steve Gooch, who is running for Lieutenant Governor. Senator, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, good afternoon, Zach. It's great to be with you guys. Sorry I'm not in person.
Hey, we're glad to let our audience hear from you, whether it's in person or in remote video call here. Most important thing is for folks to just hear from all the folks asking for their vote. So let's get into it here. You're running for lieutenant governor. If you win this lieutenant governor's race, the first policy you would push for once you get into office would be what?
Well, there's so many actually. We want to continue to crack down on illegal immigrants into this country and in the state of Georgia. We want to lower the income tax rate on hardworking Georgians. We want to do something to relieve the pressure of the property tax increases that we're seeing on homeowners across our state. We want to continue to crack down on crime. We've seen a lot of crime in our cities, especially in Atlanta and other big cities around our state. And of course, we want to continue to support the America First agenda from President Donald Trump. I want to bring that to Georgia.
Let's talk about a couple of those themes from that answer there. One was on the economy and affordability. Another you brought up was immigration. Those are big issues in the minds of a lot of voters. Let's start with immigration. You point to continuing to crack down on illegal immigration. I want to ask you about something else here. I'm curious for your thoughts. Would you support a legal pathway to citizenship for folks who are in the United States without proper documentation, but who otherwise have no criminal record?
I think that's a policy that D.C. has to address. Congress has waited way too long to address this situation. Zach, there's been Republicans and Democrats in control for decades now, and they have neglected to deal with the immigration issues in this country. We had 20 to 30 million illegals come across the border during the Joe Biden administration. On day one, when President Trump took office, he shut the border back down, and now we're seeing a lot of those illegals still in our country, and they're being rounded up by ICE, especially the ones who are committing crimes. And we have to just make it a no zero tolerance policy. If you come to this country, you need to come through the front door and not the back door. And I will continue to support President Trump in his efforts to get rid of the criminals that are in this country.
Immigration enforcement, as you rightly note, is mostly a federal effort, but there are situations where local and federal law enforcement sometimes works together on these enforcement efforts. I want to ask you this. Do you support local law enforcement agencies in Georgia collaborating with federal immigration enforcement officers on enforcement efforts?
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, it's their duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Now, I talk to a lot of sheriffs around the country and around our state and around our communities, and they've all told me that they have tried to get ICE over the past 6 to 10 years to come and pick up inmates that are being held on detainer. And during the Joe Biden administration, the ICE agents would not come and pick up those inmates in these local jails. The current administration is doing a much better job of that. So that's step number one, is local law enforcement has to communicate with ICE and the federal agencies to make sure they know that these inmates are being held. We need to get them out of our country, back to where they came from, and we need to make sure they get prosecuted for the crimes that they commit.
Let's talk about the economy. It is no secret that things are expensive right now. If you're elected lieutenant governor, what will you do to lower the cost of living?
Well, we need to get rid of unnecessary burdensome regulations, Zach. There's a lot of people today that are having to go through 6 months of wait to get a license to operate a business. That's way too long. The Secretary of State's office has to do a better job of fast tracking those processes. And I can tell you that taxes is killing our small businesses as well. But the cost of a home today, 24% of the cost of a new home is because of government regulations. That's at the local, the state, and the federal level. So we need to take a sledgehammer to all the government regulations and the nonsense that's being put on these homeowners to where we can lower the cost of living and lower the cost of building a new home today in Georgia.
How specifically, you talk about slashing these government regulations, but how specifically, which regulations would you cut to make it easier for new homes to be built?
Sure. Well, there's some examples just not far from where I live, down a couple of miles down the road, a community tried to impose restrictions on the color of the house that you have in your neighborhood. Another example was a community tried to adopt an ordinance that requires the garage to be facing a certain direction on the home. That's not the role of government. That should not be the decision that a local government makes. That should be the decision of either the person building a home or the person that's making the purchase of that home. The government has no business trying to dictate how big the house is or what color the house is, or frankly, where the garage sits, in what direction the garage sits on the home. So that's just a couple of examples. Others could be the requirements to do all the engineering that's required in advance. Some of the regulations that are being put on these developers, it's increasing the cost 20 and 30% of the home, and that cost gets passed on to the homeowner. It's not giving more profits to the developers. Those costs have to be passed on to the homeowners. So if we want to create more affordable housing, we need to start by rolling back the regulations that are being put on these folks that are having to build these homes, and of course the homeowners themselves.
And Senator, when we're talking about construction, new home construction is one focus. Another construction-related topic that's gotten a lot of attention is data centers, a point of controversy at some planning and zoning meetings, city council meetings, county commission meetings, at points all across our state. Some people have called for a pause in new data center construction. If you're elected lieutenant governor, would you support or oppose a one-year moratorium on data center construction?
Sure, I think first of all, the data centers should be paying their own way. There should not be subsidies by the local governments or by the state tax credits for the data center industry. Back years ago, when that data center incentive was created, it's because the data centers weren't coming to Georgia. Quite frankly, they're coming now more often than some people want. But I think the ultimate decision on a moratorium has to be left up to the local governments. The cities and the counties have local control over land use zonings and land use plans, and that is where that decision has to be made. Some communities may want a data center, some communities don't. I don't think they fit in a certain urban area near homeowners, but I think in certain areas that are rural and industrial zoned areas, then they might have a place to be put there, and that's a decision that the local counties and the cities must take.
Senator, you're obviously campaigning right now for lieutenant governor, but you are still a state senator, and you have, as of yesterday, some more work to do under the Gold Dome. Governor Brian Kemp has called the lawmakers back for a June 17th special session to tackle, among other topics, the possibility of redrawing Georgia's legislative district maps. How, in your view, should the legislature tackle that question when you reconvene?
Well, good question. I've been through a couple of reapportionment processes in my time as a senator. I was the majority leader for the last 3.5 years. I was the majority whip prior to that. And so I've been at the table when those decisions were made. First and foremost, you have to follow the law. And whatever the laws are, the federal laws and the state laws, that's the first thing we have to do. Second, we have to make sure we continue to put communities of interest together. We should not allow gerrymandering to take place regardless of who's in charge, whether it's Democrats or Republican. I can tell you the worst case of gerrymandering I've ever seen in my lifetime was during Governor Roy Barnes' administration back in the year 2000. In fact, his own Department of Justice overturned their maps 2 years later, and Republicans had to redraw those maps. I believe the process is going to follow the law. It's going to be fair. It's going to take input from all your communities, and it's going to take input from the legislature and the House members and the senators that are there that during that process or that week or however long it takes to make sure that we draw these maps legally, and that's going to take in accordance to what the local communities want as well. They want to keep their communities together. In other words, they don't want to represent parts of the South Georgia if they're in Middle Georgia. They don't want people in North Georgia to be combined into the city of Atlanta. People want to keep their districts similar to where they are, but they want to make sure that those communities have similar interests.
And Senator, just to be clear, because it is a Republican-controlled legislature, in the potential for newly drawn congressional district maps, would you like to see those maps more heavily favor Republicans than they currently do?
Well, anybody that is in politics wants to control the majority. Republicans want to stay in control. That's obvious. That's one of our goals, is to maintain the majority control in the House and the Senate. I'm sure President Trump wants to continue to maintain control in Washington as well. The Democrats would tell you the same thing. They would love to see the Democrat Party take over the House and the Senate. And of course, this fall, they'll have an opportunity to take over statewide races from the U.S. Senate all the way down to the local governments and county commission races around our state. And so politics is involved in this process. You can't avoid it.
Senator, we've got a little bit of time left in this conversation, and I want to make sure we end with this. You're running in a crowded Republican lieutenant governor primary. A recent AJC poll had something like 60% of poll respondents still undecided. The early voting window is about to close at the end of this week, and then it is on to Election Day on Tuesday, May 19th. Your closing pitch to an undecided voter for why they should vote for you over all of their other options in this primary would be what?
That's a great question. First thing I would ask the listeners to do is go to my website, goochforgeorgia.com. Learn about who I am. I grew up on a farm. I grew up in small town Georgia, up in North Georgia, and the hometown is Dahlonega. I'm a sixth generation Lumpkin County boy, Georgia farmer. And I got involved in politics at an early age. I became the sole county commissioner in Lumpkin County. So I literally have executive government experience that no one else in my race has. I was county commissioner for 8 years before I was on the DOT board. And then I went into the Senate. I have 16 years of experience working in the legislature, working with 3 different lieutenant governors, 2 different governors, and 2 different speakers of the House. I've worked with leadership in the Senate and the House over the last 4 years to lower income tax rates 4 consecutive years. It's the first time in the history of Georgia we've lowered the income tax. We've given back billions of dollars from Georgia's surplus from the state budget to the taxpayers of Georgia. I want to continue to work to lower that burden to 0. Can we do that overnight? No. I want to be open and transparent with everybody that's listening. Anyone that promises to get rid of the income tax in a year is telling you a story. We can do that, though, over time. I can get the rate down to 2.5% in my first term of office, and then I think we can get to 0 within 4 years after that. I also want to take a sledgehammer to the property tax system in Georgia. We should not be putting people out of their homes simply because they can no longer afford to pay their property taxes. That's been a promise that I've made in my campaign since I announced last June that I was running for lieutenant governor. My experience at the local level and at the state level gives me a unique opportunity to help get rid of property taxes in Georgia for people's homeowners, especially the senior citizens and the veterans that are hurting right now. I had a call just the other day from a lady in South Georgia who was about to lose her home. Her husband died recently. She can no longer afford to pay her taxes. She's going to lose her home if the state doesn't help out. So those are the things that I bring to the table. I can help communicate better with the House and the governor's office, and we can get this done in 2 to 3 years. And I guarantee you, nobody is more experienced than I am on that issue. So I would encourage people to take a look at my website, look at my experience, but give me a call. I'll give you my cell phone number. It's 706-300-6568. That's a commitment to you. I'll take your call, and I'll talk to you all about any issue that's on your mind. Thank you for having me today.
State Senator Steve Gooch, a Republican running for lieutenant governor. Senator, thank you for your time and your perspective. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good to be with you.